Alrighty, welcome. It's nice to have you here. You might want to grab a coffee, other beverages are acceptable, and settle back as I chat about painting my friend Augusto Rosso, one of LinkedIn's top 200 influencers. And I went through nearly a whole packet of beans while painting Augusto. It turned out to be a lot harder than what I expected, which normally is what happens when I'm painting. I always seem to challenge myself, and that's good for life, right? We want to have some challenges. But the coffee I was drinking was particularly good at that time. It was one my son had brought back from what's known as the Sunshine Capital of New Zealand, Nelson, and it was a coffee called Kush from Ethiopia, and it was a fully organic coffee. And I thought all coffee was organic, because clearly I'm ignorant. And I never knew until then that coffee was the most sprayed crop in the world. Who knew? It's a pleasant thought to have before your next non-organic coffee, isn't it? Alright, so the scene that I've picked, I'm just looking at the monitor in front of me, so if I'm not looking at the camera, I'm just watching myself paint as well. The scene that I picked for Augusto, he's a prolific poster, or was a prolific poster in 2022 on LinkedIn. A lot of selfies, a very strong personal brand, and most of them were eating ice cream. Augusto loves ice cream. But this was an older photo of his, and it was a night scene in New York. And I don't normally do a lot of backgrounds, so this was interesting for me, a night scene, and here I am using pan pastels, just painting in the lights of the cityscape, trying to capture them anyway. And in this painting, I'm mostly using pan pastels. I really like pan pastels for portraits. They're very quick. They're a little limiting, which forces me to think about what I'm doing. But they're very, very much like, as you can see, it's like a palette knife. Well, it's a sponge knife. You won't cut yourself with those. So they're little micro sponges that specially made to pick up the pan pastel and release it onto the paper. And this is a cotton-rich Canson paper using. The colour tone is called Moonstone. And it was absolutely the wrong colour to use. That's just... sometimes on the journey we pack the wrong things, right? And I thought this would be a great paper and would bring out the warmth in Augusto and his wife's skin, and I was completely wrong. Probably should have been maybe a dark blue tone paper. Get more of the darkness of the night involved, and later on when you get to see his denim jacket. Oh look, you see, there I go with another coffee. Every time you see a plunger, another hour has gone by. So about an hour to block in this particular background. Oh, and his eyes, their eyes I should say. The eyes are done with pastel pencils. I have not got the skill to use these sponge applicators to get the eyes the way I want. And normally I do the eyes or detail work with pencils early on in the piece, just so I can avoid smudging later on, because I tend to get it very close and get caught up in the moment and lean my hand on the paper. And, oh look, you see, I was really cranking through the coffees on this particular picture. So we just move into blocking in. This is Rosso's jacket, and still sticking with the pan pastels all the way through. And on the cotton rich paper, they just soak in beautifully, and it's very different if you use a grippy textured paper like Pastel matte. I wouldn't dare use them on a sanded paper, because the sponges just rip. They dissolve quite quickly on Pastel matte. But on these more budget-friendly Canson Mitantes papers, they work fantastic. Just a really lovely medium to play with. So, what am I going to talk to you about today? That's right, I'm going to talk to you about my painting journey, and when to stop. According to history, or whoever the meme creator was, the saying, how does it go? Art is never finished, it's only abandoned, is attributed to that wonderful inventor and artist Leonardo da Vinci. Art is never finished, only abandoned. And it's an interesting statement. I mean, if you're an artist, you'll have your own views about when the right time to stop a painting or a drawing is. The same thing happens in music. I've heard of. In fact, I was watching a documentary of Queen, and it was a song that Freddie Mercury had done, and he wanted it raw, so he didn't polish it. He got it done, and then he just left it, and he just wanted it raw. So that met the style of the album they were working on. I remember reading, because you tend to, as you're learning art, you get a whole lot of books out of the library or buy them and read about what these artists are saying. And one particular one said that in her experience, most amateurs stop their paintings too soon. They give up too soon. They sort of get through all the blocking in stage. The blocking in stage is terrible. It's an ugly stage. You're kind of lost and you're feeling your way around, and nothing looks like it's going to end up being. So there you can see that's what I'm trying to get to at the end there. But I'm a long way from getting there yet. And so this artist said, well, most amateurs, they just stop way too soon, and so their work it just needs that extra polish, and then it'll be done. But in my art journey, I've discovered that most of the paintings are not a destination at all. They're just part of the journey. And what I mean by that is when you go on a road trip, you've been on the road trip, especially if you're a mum or a dad and you've taken your kids with you, you know what it's like. Are we there yet? Yeah, when are we going to get there? Like we've just left the house. So, a couple of hours on the road, and you're starting to get a bit numb. And where I live in New Zealand, my wife and I go on a road trip, you go through endless miles of country, and it all looks very much the same. A bit of variation. There's some hills and different trees, but it's pretty much the same. And then eventually you see a sign, and it says "Scenic Lookout." And I'm going to say it in kilometres because that's how we do it here. I'll switch from miles to kilometres, but I can't convert it from kilometres into miles anymore. So it'll say "Scenic Lookout, 2 kilometres." So it gives you a bit of a heads up, and then you get closer, 500 metres, scenic lookout. And you go, okay, well, I'll turn off here. And you pull over, and I'm sure it's just designed to give you a bit of a break, so you don't drive tired. But you pull out and you get in front of that scenic outlook and you actually go, yeah, that is different. Yeah, that's made the journey. That was worth driving 2 hours just to see that. Particularly if it's a little walk and you wander off and go see a waterfall or something. And there we go. Look, another coffee, which reminds me. Excuse me. All that beautiful kush is gone now. I'm actually drinking one called Colt. Put a kick in my day. Yeah, so paintings like that on the journey, a lot of what I do is I can't do a scenic outlook every time. Some of it is just miles of countryside. It's ordinary. And then suddenly you get to a bit where a painting it jumps out and you go, yep, that was worth the journey. Speaking of journeys, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about Augusto and this photo photo reference that I'm working off. Lovely Augusto. So I met him in June 2022 on LinkedIn. Early on, when I was getting involved in the Social Saturday events, those heady days. Augusto's originally from Colombia, and he's got a very unique, charismatic style all of his own on LinkedIn. Like I said, quite often he'll have a photo and there he is, having an ice cream. It's like, just delightful. And he takes quite a few photos of his family as well. And this was one he had done of his wife, and he wrote this post. He says, 2001, I was 20. My girl and I went to New York City. Every day we spent 15 hours working. They're long days, aren't they? 15 hours working. And 3 hours per day in the subway. I wondered if they fell asleep while they were on the subway train. We'd gone to make money for our BA thesis documentary. 6 months later, we'd seen little of the Big Apple. A day before flying back home, we visited the Twin Towers, a place that fascinated us as it felt like the top of the world. It was a serene summer's eve. We spent hours, 1,362 feet above ground, absorbing a spectacular scene that blew our minds. A month later, both skyscrapers disappeared. We were among the last people to see how the world looked back from their deck. We often miss discovering what's closest, taking it for granted. We're too busy, but nothing lasts forever. Act on those things that matter to you while you've still got time. It's quite profound, isn't it? I remember when the Twin Towers came down, it was devastating. Such a shocking thing. I turned up at work. Everyone was crowded around the TV in the cafe, just in stunned silence. As I think we watched the next one go down. Anyway, as I'm working on this portrait, I began to realise that the painting of Augusto, there he is, I've pretty much completed him, and now I'm just fussing around on his wife. And the reason for that is that I realised the painting was not about him. You see, although Augusto is really successful in business, he's a nice, charismatic man. What makes him who he is the people he loves. That's who he talks about on LinkedIn. that's how he behaves on LinkedIn, with love. And so if I couldn't get his wife right in this painting, what was the point of doing it? So I spent hours and hours just trying to get her right. And I'm not sure that I did, because the particular photo, it's 20 years old and it had been taken at night. There was a flash used, so it washes out the features. And while I can close my eyes and see Augusto's face, I've seen so many photos of him, I haven't seen that many photos of his wife, so I just don't know her that well. And so I'm just trying to capture it, and I spoke to my wife and said, I can't seem to get the painting right. In fact, I stopped, I signed it, and I left it on my easel. I'm like, I'm done, I can't fix this. And I asked my wife, because she's a much better painter than I am, and she said, I think the eyes are too close together. And so I get out my pencil and I measure the reference photo and against what I've got, and I'm like, no, they're not. But there was something about the eyes, and I ended up realising the bridge of her nose was just a little too far across, so I adjusted that and it felt so much better, and the width of her mouth, and I'm not trying to get a photorealistic painting, I'm just trying to capture the essence of the person. I loved how they were holding themselves together so tight, and that's how they are as a couple. So this became a series of paintings of Augusto. He had lots of these solo pictures of himself, but as I said, I wanted to get the essence of who he was, and who he was as his family. So here's the one of him and his wife. It's not the best painting I've done in my life, but I felt a real affinity to Mr. and Mrs. Rosso as I was doing it. And the pan pastels, I think they worked pretty well. I'm happy with those sort of spotlights behind them. You can see the colours being pulled in. The red, it would have been a red, what do you call it? I know it's a sign, but it would be the name of the business underneath the spotlights come into her jacket. Some of his blues of his denim are spread around the rest of the picture as well. Towards the end here, I'm just going to add more colour to their faces and splash some of the red of her jacket back up into his face, and some of the blue of his denim into hers, and strengthen the contrast behind where we've got that yellow and purple. Beautiful complementary colours. Just make them a little stronger, because it was just looking a little bit washed out. And for her mouth, I've sort of learnt not to fuss too much about the teeth. Don't try and draw individual teeth. It just, I don't know, doesn't work for me. And you can see, most of this painting has been about coming back, making micro adjustments of Mrs. Rosso. So Augusto, I was just happy with the effect that I had, the colours on his skin, the expression on his face. He's kind of looking off somewhere over there. They're not doing the deep into each other's eyes look. Maybe I've got time just to read you one more of his posts about them. He says, "My girl and I started a modest company when we were young. Very young. One small no investor would have bet on. She designed jewels. I sold them. First I targeted small shops in our city, then in towns where I went by train. Many days were tough and discouraging. After a couple of years we could afford to buy a car. Suddenly I could travel across the rest of the country. Sales picked up. We employed several people. Exports started in France and Italy. Eventually we sold our products in 25 countries, including large department stores in the Middle East and Asia. A modest hobby became a highly profitable venture that we felt proud of. We realised you'll never know what you are capable of until you do it. Even if others doubt you, always believe in yourself, for if you don't, who will?" And I think we've got quite similar philosophies, Augusto and I. And when I started doing art, because I haven't even hit 60 paintings yet. So when I did the first one, I didn't know what I was doing. In fact, up until about 15 or 20 pictures in, I just had no idea. But I was determined that I believed I could do it. That if I just kept practicing, if I could get to 50 paintings on a journey, I should have an idea of what I'm doing. And if you haven't started an artistic journey, or you're on some other creative journey, or even a business journey, it normally takes 3 months of effort, constant effort, before you even start to feel like you're becoming competent. And here I'm just sort of describing the changes that I'd made to myself. So a journey, you won't necessarily see the scenic outlooks at the start of the journey. They're on the way. But if you don't start that journey, you're never going to see them. So I hope that you take away from this video not so much about the painting that I'm doing, but just that if you go on that journey, just take the time to pull over, look at the things that you've been on, enjoy what you've seen, and don't abandon it. Maybe art isn't abandoned, it just carries on. So I'd like to thank you very, very much. Thanks for watching. See you next time.